Welcome to our official review for Logic's 9th studio album, Ultra 85. Logic fans have been waiting for this studio album for a very long time, and Logic himself had said that he was working on this project for nearly 10 years. This is a prequel to the incredible True Story, which is a fan favorite for the Rat Pack. But guys, if you want to see more reviews just like this on the channel, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell because we're doing reviews like this every single week. But Lou, let's get into the artist performance. Listen, Logic was on game for this album. I always go into a Logic project and I expect top tier rapping, and I feel like you did get that throughout the entire album.
100%. I feel like Logic had a lot of fun with this album, and I feel like, he's rapping at these Eminem level speeds across a lot of these tracks. And I think my major takeaway from his performance on this album is how much effort he put into it and how much passion is oozing out of him. Starting off on the intro, Paul Rodriguez, ambitious intro. He's rapping on it for like 9 minutes, and he comes in with his classic relentless nonstop flow. I feel like around the 1 minute 30 mark, his rhyme scheme gets a bit too wordy and he loses the pocket, but then he picks it up and finds it back again. And it's one of his most focused and passionate rapping performances I've ever heard from him. So that was definitely a major highlight. What was cool too about his performance is that you saw him take certain creative risks and experiment with his vocals. For example, on a song like Fear, where you get some auto crooning, kind of reminded me of like later melodic Mac Miller, like Divine Feminine sort of vibe, especially when you think about the production that was backing him on that song. And he's also rapping on that track, so you get a cool hybrid where he comes in with some brand new jumpy, quirky flows. So that was really enjoyable. And on the second part of the song, he picks up the singing again, and that's where I'm like, hey, you know what? I can only handle Logic singing maybe in doses. Like at a certain point,
I really like the
melodies get a bit stale at a certain point.
No, I disagree with you. I think the second part of that song was really cool. I like the melodies on the second half when the production completely switches, and I think listen, it was a strong single going into the album, so I feel like that was really good. Listen, if you're an OG Logic fan and you've been listening to him since the early 2010s, I feel like there's a lot of performances on here that'll take you through memory lane. For example, on something like Deja Vu, the flows are practically identical to something like Fade Away, for example, off of the incredible True Story. And those types of flows and melodies just show you how when Logic gets locked into a certain flow, a certain rhythmic timing, it's very hard for him to lose it. And I feel like there's a bunch of different performances like that off of the album. Even something like Mission Control, right? Because we'll talk about it a bit more in the production category, but the beat is a bit more fast-paced. You see that you have these fast-paced drums coming through, and he has no problem attacking them. And I really like that about his flow throughout the album. A performance where I was like, okay, I'm kind of on the fence about this. I mean, as a whole, I do like the concept of the song, but I just didn't like, I guess, the hook, or you could say the pre-chorus of it was on Teleport, where you have
you're bugging me like ziz.
Yeah, like you see, I didn't know like if I fucked with it because of the creativity or just the execution, but kind of sounded off to me. But at the same time, like I was realizing how he was getting in and out of those flows, and I'm like, oh, it's pretty fucking solid. But the whole ziz thing,
it's a bit silly.
It's a bit silly. It's not necessarily for me, but nonetheless, I still found it creative, the way that he was able to experiment with that type of flow and the way that he was able to use his melodies.
But that fourth verse from Logic on Teleport is arguably one of the best verses on this album and maybe of his career. Like, he really delves into a lot of shit that we'll get into when we talk about content. But yeah, that was an awful hook on that song, without a doubt. Then you get another really bad hook that just suffers from bad writing, and that was on Antidote, which is a song that shouldn't have been on this album at all. It's just such a big outlier sonically. Apart from that, I also want to speak about the bridge he has on Love Me, where he just repeats Give Me the Light about 100 times. It started to sound like a glitching robot for how repetitive it was. And then he also has a section where he's talking about like how he wants his fans to love him, and that got really annoying just because of, again, the amount of repetition of a singular line on that song really threw me off. Apart from that, on 40 Forever, that's a song where you expect Logic to go in really hard with the bars, with the flows, with the performance, everything you expect to be top tier, because when you go back to songs like 44 Bars or 44 More, that's always like oftentimes the spark of a track list where it's a banger, but it's also super lyrical. In this case, I just feel like you didn't get the most dope wordplay or rhymes, even though he had this really quick flow that is natural to Logic.
Well, yeah, because
on the rhyme side, it was lacking for me, at least.
Well, I mean, Is it lacking
Where
for
are the
Logic?
standout bars,
But
though?
we'll talk about it in the content. We're in
There's
artist
standout
performance.
bars in other songs. I'm saying on this one, it's one where you expected to get them, and instead you're getting him using Jid's flow on 151 Rum. And with Logic, it's always hard to know if he's biting or paying homage because he's a huge student of the game and he's always paying homage on nearly every song. So I didn't think anything of that, but I did hear that there's a certain flow that reminds me of Jid on 151.
Yeah, but I mean, like, where did JID get that flow then? You know, like, you just have to ask that
I,
question.
I hadn't heard it anywhere else before that one. I'm
mean,
just
bro,
saying, but
there's a whole
again,
archive of music and.
but again,
you know.
I didn't say he's biting because Logic loves to pay homage. He does it all across the whole
Yeah, but I
record.
don't even know if it was inspired by JID or not, or he was thinking about 151 when writing it.
It
My
really
problem,
sounds like it, though.
When my problem with 44 ever was just more of like the mic presence. I feel like when you go into 44 more, like, or 44 bars, you have that really aggressive and hungry Logic that just feels like a pit bull, right? Like he's willing to absolutely destroy the track, and it feels like he's almost going to come out of his own song. But with this, I feel like he was a bit, not more reserved, but he was a bit more reliant on the quick flows, which I didn't necessarily find the best play. But regardless, though, he's still locked in. It was still really cool. You also get more meditative performances on something like Interstellar, for example, and that was something else that I liked about this album is on the deeper cuts like that, or even something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's talking about his career. We'll get into that in the content. You're able to understand what he's saying. Often, a big problem with Logic, at least for mainstream hip hop fans or people that are trying to get into his music, is like he overcomplicates shit, or he's rapping too quick to the point to where you don't necessarily understand what he's saying. I was even talking to my cousin about this over the weekend. He's a huge Logic fan, and he was like, "Man, like there was certain songs I couldn't get into because he was either rapping too fast, or I couldn't get into, like, let's say, the sonic landscape of it." But I kind of disagreed with him because once you look at songs or records like that, he's taking his time with his flows. He's patient. Pronunciation's on point. It almost feels like Logic is talking to you. So I do feel like for the deeper cuts off of this album, he really did a good job at getting his point across, and it wasn't overcomplicated. It wasn't too fast, and everything flowed super well. So I think artist performance gets a great rating.
Yeah, I think I go with a great rating for the artist performance. I mean, not too many mishaps performance-wise, and cool to see him experiment with some of them. But next up, let's go into the content. So this album, before it came out, a lot of people thought it was going to be a sequel to The Incredible True Story. And as you actually dive into the skits and the story that's being set, you realize that it's actually a prequel to The Incredible True Story. So, of course, we're still following through with the characters, Thomas and Kai, who are like co-captains on the spaceship. And where The Incredible True Story ended was that they were about to reach paradise. They were about to reach this habitable planet. And on this one, we start to see from the beginning that they meet for the first time and they're about to embark on this journey to find paradise. So, again, the concept is loosely woven in through different skits. And to be honest with you, I feel like it was a missed opportunity because when you go into the writing of this album, you realize that Logic seems to be in the best place mentally, and it seems like he's finally found serenity and peace in his life, and has put all distractions aside to really focus on what makes him happy, and that's his family and creating art that he genuinely fucks with. So to me, I just naturally felt like there would have been more of a parallel with Thomas and Kai reaching paradise and exploring it, as Logic in his own life has reached his personal paradise.
I get what you're saying.
So I feel like for the arc of the storyline and to make it really connect to his own life, because there's always been parallels between both stories, that should have been the route. Because with this, you're hearing the characters 9 years later, and you're not gaining anything new about what
but
it
you
represents.
do get a bit of backstory, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, like going on to, let's say, the chess skit, right? Like right after they get out of like that neuro game, right, where they both pass away and then they come back to reality, and they're talking about how, well, maybe I'm not liking this type of game, but let's play chess, let's play my own thing. And then they start getting into the backstory of the characters. I feel like that was good character development. I also think that if you go through The Incredible True Story, just to kind of talk about that album a bit, because there's a lot of parallels between that and this. Obviously, it's kind of the same format. You go to like, something like A Fade Away, for example, or Young Jesus. There's not necessarily the most topical focus when you look at the skits and even those songs and those records, and they more serve as, like, let's say, a soundtrack to the main characters being in the ship, right? As they're flying through trying to find paradise.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was the exact same vibe for this, where you weren't going to necessarily get the most woven in concept as far as writing goes. The writing on the album is strictly Logic, again, like you had said, talking about his passion for music, talking about his family, talking about, the new endeavors that he's on, and talking about how he's moved past the fame and how he's moved past the numbers game. But I appreciate that, because even when you go on to something like, let's say, a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I feel like that's one of the coolest concepts in Logic's catalog, because obviously we know that Logic's a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. And it's cool because he uses his albums to kind of parallel it to, like, how would you say it? What's the word again? The filmography? What's it called?
Yeah, his filmography.
Yeah, exactly. I learned that, Lou. I learned that word from Lou in a live stream. So I found that such an interesting concept, because it's directly speaking to how Logic feels as an artist and what really inspires him and what really drives him. Even at that, looking at something like a Teleport, for example, even if I wasn't a fan of that hook, looking at the song concept, the ability to kind of rap in the perspective of you teleporting to different, hardships in your life and different things that you experienced that really shaped you, and stuff that really, really hurt you as a man, and stuff that really brought you up. I found that to be super vulnerable, and I really liked the song concept, and I feel like it was executed upon well.
100%. And I feel like, he's always rapped about his tumultuous childhood, and he's rapped about his family life, but not with the nuance that you're getting on a song like Teleport, where he really goes in depth about, being a 7-year-old kid who was neglected by his parents, about, how at 8 years old, his father's girlfriend had molested him. And there's a lot of positive shit, but he finds a way to have a positive outlook.
You mean a lot of negative things, but he finds a way to...
Sorry, a lot of negative shit, but he finds a way to have a positive outlook on the situation by the end of it. So, yeah, definitely a cool song concept. Going back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, love how he's rapping about his music career through these movie metaphors. And what really spoke to me was also, him speaking about how the movie Kill Bill got him into wanting to rap and got him in love with hip hop as a whole, because RZA took care of that soundtrack. And then him speaking about how he related to the character of Rick Dalton from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because, at a certain point in the movie, Rick feels like he's a has-been who doesn't have anything else to offer. And Logic also felt at the peak of his fame that he didn't know where to go next, and he wasn't really being fulfilled by the work he was doing. So it was cool for him to be like, you know what? My favorite Tarantino movie changed because I changed as a person, and I was able to connect to one character, to one storyline more than another. So it was cool to get that insight, because we always get to hear about artists' inspirations, but not in the detail that Logic provides in a song like this. Another big standout in terms of the writing was definitely Interstellar, where it's a song about the importance of just being grateful for being alive, for the things that we often overlook. And he compares it to like how there's 300,000 people waking up in body bags every day and unfortunately passing away. And it's just a cool song about, doing everything you can to make your dreams.
In my opinion,
be
this is the
fulfilled.
best written verse on the album for me. Like, I feel like introspection-wise and just knowledge-wise, and even like just as a complete song as a whole, this has been my favorite. Even The Future by Lucy Rose was
Also,
fucking
some
fantastic.
cool math bars like add something to this world, don't multiply the vision. There's not the most one-liners and quotables that really stand out at you, but there are a couple for sure.
But also, let's talk about the pop culture references within the entire album. I feel like this album and the writing itself is filled with riches of just pop culture and different things. So, example, talking about Quentin Tarantino's catalog on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Even at that, going on to a song like Favela, that was cool because now Logic is talking about how video games, affected his catalog and affected his artistry and how it brought him up in the game. And just, I found that so cool. And like, obviously, if you guys have played MW2, you guys know the map Favela, and it's a parallel to that. Not only that, but, he's talking about how old rappers inspired him. We've kind of gotten that content before throughout the album. I just feel like, yes, maybe he didn't stick on topic as much as he could have, but even at that, in The Incredible True Story, he didn't do that anyways, and I still found the writing to be amazing. I'm going to go with a great rating, though. I'm going to go with a great rating on the content.
Yeah, I'll go with a great rating because you do have, some lyrics that remind you of like Big Day Chance the Rapper in a song like Gardens 3. He raps, I love the man I become. I don't want to see the hood version. I came from nothing. Now I'm splurging on Rodeo. My wife is whiter than Yayo, but she not woke. She was never sleep. Or antidote, my bitch is bad as fuck. I got 2 kids, and yeah, she smoke.
Anyways.
You
Yeah.
got a couple of those, but ultimately the writing, I think that he's attacking a lot of real personal issues that he has in the past, just with more detail, and really painting a more vivid picture. So ultimately, I agree with the great rating. It
All
was
right.
very well written. But let's go into the features, and I have to give Logic a lot of props because what he'll often do with these more recent albums is that he'll find artists and put them on by giving them features. He won't go for the most mainstream names. He'll go for people that will actively contribute to making his vision fulfilled for these different songs. So you have about 6 features. You have T-Man the Wizard, you have DJ Drama, Robert Ivory, Ade, Lucy Rose, and The Loopers. So let's start off with T-Man the Wizard on Mission Control. He has the chorus on that. What did you think?
It's pretty standard. Wasn't anything too crazy.
I thought it was unnecessary. Like he pops in once towards the end and gives you like these
Like
vocals
honestly,
that
yeah, because if you really like pay attention to it, especially like with that production, I think that Logic should have had that solo verse,
Yeah.
and then that was pretty much it, right? If you wanted to maybe fit him in somewhere else, that could have been a good decision. I just felt like it was maybe a miscalculation. as far as
unnecessary,
duration
and he
goes.
sounded tired and kind of his vocals were just a bit strained. It's a
But
weird
DJ
choice.
Drama on Deja Vu,
Waste. No need. Like
It was
he's there as a hype man. Sure, it's cool. Like he's done so many other times, but he's like
yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways,
It
let's keep
just
going with
didn't,
this. Ghost in the Machine, featuring Robert Ivory and Phil Ade.
Yeah, best features on the album on this song.
You think so?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A Day really impressed me. He understood the assignment. He came in with a more calm and patient flow over that ethereal beat, and just amazing internal rhymes from him as well. Slow calculator raps. To me, you could argue that maybe he had the better performance compared to Logic on that song. He
That's interesting.
Really, really snapped.
Yeah, that third verse was really strong. I think that it was definitely well executed upon. But let's go on to Lucy Rose.
What about Robert Ivory on that song?
I believe he has a chorus on it, right? I believe he
Yeah,
has
he's singing on the track, and he interpolates the slave songs from Bobby Tarantino, and really well sung.
It was really nice.
Really solid
This
performance.
is probably one of the best songs off of the track list,
For
to be
sure.
honest with you. But Interstellar, Lucy Rose. This is my favorite feature on the entire album. Her vocals are beautiful. She's obviously collaborated with Logic before. Songs like Anxiety, Intermission, Thank You, Wake Up. Like, they definitely have history together. And I just feel like, it was such a smart assignment to just give her the 2 choruses. Get Logic in for his verse. He did what he had to do. Again, this is my favorite song on the album, and she never disappoints on a Logic track. And I feel like it wouldn't feel like a Logic album without her.
Yeah, it was definitely the best chorus on the album. I love
It's like Logic's Anna Wise to a certain extent.
Yeah,
you know?
it
kind of
is.
feels like that.
It is, yeah. It's definitely like his hook partner, you could say. But yeah, I liked her high-pitched, fragile vocals on that one. T-Man is there once again in retrospect. Shouldn't have been. Again, doesn't really add anything of any entertaining value to that track or to the other one. Then you have The Loopers on Antidote, who brings a lot of energy and flair to the song. Nothing too special.
Yeah, you
bar
want to talk about
flow-wise.
biting flows? Don't tell me that's a Baby Keem flow. That's a Baby Keem flow.
Honestly, I wasn't thinking about that when I heard it. Maybe I have to hear it again. Could
no,
be, though.
go back to it.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's absolutely a Baby
Okay.
Keem flow. I was bumping it in the whip, and I was just like, yeah, that sounds like something off of the Melodic Blues.
Shit, okay. I got to get another listen.
No,
I
you
didn't
have
pick
to
up
go
on
back
that.
to that.
And then Robert Ivory comes back on City in the Stars and has some really nice vocal inflections, seamless switches from rapping to singing, an extended chorus, a verse, and cool story. Apparently, Logic found him like on his Discord or something.
Crazy.
So again, just love to see Logic put on for these artists, but ultimately, they were never, besides a couple of these, they were never really the sparks of the songs. They didn't bring the most life to these tracks, and I just feel like he could have done without quite a few of these. So I'm gonna give the features a good rating.
It's a good rating, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily take it to a whole different place as far as an album experience goes, but still really solid. But let's keep going on with this. Let's go on to the production. So what was interesting is that when Logic did an interview before this album, like a couple of years ago, he said that he wanted it to be all like live Travis Barker drums, and then he wanted it to be all live instrumentals. And you go into this album, and it's definitely not that. It's definitely a completely different direction. And I think it was the right move to have him and Six take care of almost the entire production list. It would not be a Logic album without that.
Yeah, you absolutely need that. But yeah, it's funny how many iterations this album took on. I remember at one point he said Ultra 85 would never come out because a lot of the music that it would have been turned into No Pressure. So I really wonder like how old some of these records are.
Like I think you would have maybe
like-
seen a GP4 low-key, because there's like a GP4 reference here and there throughout the track list, right?
For
So
sure.
I think that would have been crazy. Seeing GP4.
Or Open Mic, Aquarius 3,
Yeah.
maybe that one as well.
No, Soul Food 2 would have probably stayed on that
Stayed
track
on that
list
track
because it
list.
was an Under Pressure track initially. But regardless, though, you want to talk about some interpolations and some flips. let's talk about Mission Control. So that was the first one that we saw, and that's obviously Gucci Mane's old song called Lemonade. That track is obviously iconic, and I love the flip because it starts off as the regular beat, right? And it automatically gets you hooked. You're like, fuck, is he really rapping over this? But then it's interesting because that beat is so fast paced, and the switch is still fast paced, but it feels like more of like a New York boom bap sort of
I
production.
feel like he slowed down the keys of the
Yes,
instrumental a little bit, but brought in more aggressive drums. So it was a cool flip, bro. And
it was definitely a cool
that that
flip.
that instrumental is always going to be infectious. So for me to hear anyone who could spit over that beat, I'll always be happy. What was cool too in terms of flips, looking at Deja Vu, he's rapping over an altered version of Fade Away with this one, and it's a bit too sped up. I felt like it's not as good as the OG Fade Away beat, but it was still a cool piece of fan service, you know?
Well, that's it. I also want to say this about the production. I mean, a lot of people underrate Logic's production. Six has been an underrated producer for mostly the entirety of his career because he's mostly handled Logic production and has stayed in house, especially with Rat Pack and whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. But you look at a lot of these sample flips, and it's just absolutely crazy. Another production I really like is Fear. When I initially heard this on a live stream a couple of months ago, I'm like, fuck, this is crazy. This was a crazy beat, especially with the double switch. Like, it just makes no sense. And it feels very atmospheric. It feels very ethereal as a production as well. And there's a beautiful groove to it. I love the Divine Feminine comparison as well because you have like that,
That dance groove.
yeah, and that beautiful sunny vibe to it too. Like, it's just such a nice production
Yeah,
for the
it
track
was like
list.
some like uplifting funk house kind of beat, and you had this electric bass, some violins, and I also love how they slowed down the production for the second half so seamlessly. My favorite soul sample chop has to be on Ghost in the Machine. This stemmed from a snippet that Logic had played. He's wearing a jacket and like he's vibing in a room. I don't know if you remember it, but
Oh yeah, the fans wanted this forever.
probably the most heavenly soul chop you'll hear all year on Ghost in the Machine. It brings me joy to listen to it. I even love just the orchestral flourishes you hear towards the end. How did you feel about the 44 Ever beat? Because I'm mixed on
Yeah.
that one. Like, you have like these Tame Impala-esque synths that are really nice, but then it just kind of turns into this generic trap beat.
But you see, I like it because, the 44 series always had like these hard knocking 808s, so I feel like it kind of stays true to the
Yeah.
song series. But I do feel like it's a stronger beat off of the album. And I did like the song. I wish it was actually a bit longer, if I'm being honest with you, and that he maybe came a bit more aggressive on the track, but I feel like there is going to be replay value there. I do like the synths on the track, and as I said, it kind of stays true to the actual song
Any
series.
beats that you didn't like on this track list?
I would probably say Antidote.
Okay, yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
Antidote is definitely a weaker song for me. I think the loop is a bit generic. It sounds like something I would have heard in 2016, and the drums are all right. Nothing too crazy. You get these bells that kind of ring in and out, and I guess it adds something dynamic to it. But when you start the track and finish it, there's nothing that really happens. It's like you know what to expect as soon as you hear the first 5 seconds of the production to the last 5 seconds of the production, and they're waiting. You're like, is something gonna change? Maybe gonna slow down the tempo at a certain point, but no, it just kind of stays the same throughout all of
It
it.
just kind of feels out of place because throughout this you're getting soulful, jazzy, boom bap production for the most part, and then you just have this, like you said, 2016 trap beat on this song, and you're just like, well, this wasn't needed. Other highlights for me, I love the atmospheric instrumental on Love Me. You have some nice lo-fi key progressions, a 6 snare pattern, and I love when he creates moods like he did on that track.
Even Interstellar for me is another big production stand. Just beautiful, atmospheric, and also a very calming production. I feel like it's definitely a soothing beat as far as the rest of this track list goes. So overall, listen, I think the production was consistent. I didn't come into this album expecting bad production.
No,
I
definitely
think
not.
it was impossible.
Yeah.
Like, the chances of getting bad production on a Logic album that's this anticipated and that's a sequel to
No way.
arguably one of his best produced albums with The Incredible True Story, I think was slim to none. So overall, I think the production was great, and I think that it was executed on a fantastic note by Six and Logic.
It was great, yeah. Just a very chill soundscape, reminiscent of a lot of Logic's earlier work. I feel like if it wasn't for an Antidote or a Gardens 3 and a couple other productions, It
Yeah,
could
you
have.
didn't like
It could
Guardians
have.
3?
Production wise, it was overproduced for sure.
But I liked the drums in
I didn't
back
like
of
the
it.
synths on it either.
Yeah, I
The way
liked
certain
it.
instrumentals were layered, I
Do you
didn't
feel
fuck
like
with it.
that's one of the tracks off of the album that if it was maybe worked on a bit better and the writing was maybe a bit improved, that it could have been one of the best off of the album?
No, just because I didn't like
Oh,
much
I
about the
liked it.
song. I didn't like the performance. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the beat.
That's interesting.
But yeah, ultimately, yeah, it could have easily been amazing, but just a couple of beats knocked it down to great. But let's go on to the replay value. Obviously, this is an album that we've waited for the longest fucking time. It fits in to that sort of, intergalactic sort of series that Logic has built up throughout his catalog, and I think that it will be one of those albums alongside an Under Pressure, alongside The Incredible True Story and No Pressure, that's one of the most valued from the Logic fan base. And for that reason, I feel like, people are gonna be listening to this for a very fucking long time, just because you
for
do
sure.
have timeless themes within this. I do feel like it could have been curated a little bit better, in the sense of, I do wish that certain skits were maybe given their own tracks, and that they weren't like taking up a minute or two at the end of certain songs. But that's fine. That's a minor curation nitpick that doesn't really bog anything down. Apart from that, I'm not messing with maybe 2 or 3 songs, but ultimately super consistent track list. I went with great for the replay value.
I went with the same rating. I mean, going through this track list, I feel like there's going to be a lot of songs I'm going to be revisiting. I love the Soul Food 2 rendition, and I feel like that's one of my favorite songs from his catalog, so I'm definitely going to be fucking with Deja Vu. I really liked Mission Control. I loved Paul Rodriguez. I liked Fear. I've been bumping that song low-key all year. Favela was cool. Ghost in the Machine, Interstellar, 44 Ever. Even if I have the nitpick with the mic presence, I'm still going back to the track itself. Like, I have a lot of songs on here that I'm going back to, and like you had said, maybe besides a couple of songs that didn't necessarily hit the same for the rest of the track list, you're going to be all over this album, right?
And the skits. I'll be honest with you. Like I said, it was cool to see like them build their rapport and like the character development, backstory, etc. Cool and all, but am I gonna play a 3-minute skit like Planet Death? I'm not.
Probably
I'm gonna
not. But that
skip
was
over
kind of
those.
cool, though. The cinematic value behind
Very
that.
cool. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was fire.
Yeah.
And like I was low-key like really engaged. It felt like I was watching a sci-fi movie when I was in
Yeah.
that skit itself.
It was cool.
That was cool. But yeah, like you had said, you're getting a lot of runtime on the skits. So I guess maybe that weighs it down by a tad, but great replay value.
For
I'm
sure.
gonna be all over this album for 2024. But overall thoughts. Logic did fan service. He finally delivered his magnum opus. I feel like it lived up to the hype. I feel like the writing was well done. I feel like the production catered to Logic fans. You also saw a bit of an evolution in the production as well for his catalog. Some beats that I would never hear on another Logic album. And I just feel like for the fans and for the Rat Pack and everyone that's been following his career, like, how could you be disappointed with this project? There's nothing to be disappointed in. Even looking at the skits on this album, like we were talking about, I believe it was the skit Planet Death. Like, you could have the argument that you're not going to go back to that skit and that there's not necessarily the most replay value. But on the other hand, that's fantastic to see in a rap album. Like, I was genuinely impressed. I'm like, who else is doing this fucking shit within a rap album? And it was also cool to see the maturity from Logic. I mean, on No Pressure, we finally saw that leap, especially after getting lackluster albums. And I feel like since then, he's been on a good road with his projects, and I feel like you saw even more evolution within himself on this album. So I genuinely feel like this is a well-executed studio album. I feel like it lived up to the hype, and he did a lot of fan service. It's a great rating for me.
Yeah, and those that 5-year stretch in between The Incredible True Story and No Pressure, where he was just dropping week project after week project. But something you could always count on is that when Logic really puts time and effort into a grandiose album experience, he is going to deliver, and that's exactly what we got on Ultra 85. I feel like the song concepts are some of the best you'll see from his entire catalog. You're going to get some of the most layered cinematic production he's ever rapped over. I also feel like when it came to certain creative risks that he was taking, I enjoyed his singing on this album way more than I did on, let's say, a Bobby Tarantino 3 or another track list where he experimented with it. So I feel like with this album, I'm seeing that he's perfecting a lot of styles. He's perfecting a lot of skill sets, and it's just beautiful to see that he really lived up to the hype with this track list. And even though I wish the concept was maybe a bit more fleshed out, or maybe had more parallels to where he seemed to be at in his life, I can't complain too much. Solid rap album, and you're getting some of his best ever tracks. And I feel like for everyone that marveled at his pen back in 2014, you get to experience that once again.
Man, I remember being back at Pearson, listening to that album on the bus every single day in high school, and brought me so many memories going back to this album. And it's kind of crazy how like I started high school with that album, and now like I'm reviewing music and I'm going back to a prequel a bit. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a really cool full circle moment for me. But guys, great rating. You know the drill. If you did enjoy this album review, smash the subscribe button, smash the like button, because we're going to be covering more Logic content on the channel. I feel like I want to bring this album into a couple of different series that we have, because there's so much value within it and
There is.
so many different conversations to have about it. But guys, thank you so much for watching till the end. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.